Welcome back. Probably should figure out an actual name for this channel at some point. But probably the most common question I have ever been asked in 10 plus years of student ministry is, how far is too far? Basically, obviously when you're working with junior high, high school, college age individuals, one of the main things that tends to come up in conversations with them, as well as one of the main things that tends to come up just in their life, is relationships. Boy likes girl, girl likes boy, how to deal with things like the friend zone, how to deal with stuff like, I like him but he doesn't like me back, I like this girl and that girl, I'm not sure which one is the best one for me. All those kind of questions come up a lot. But the number one question I've always heard, every age group, is, what am I allowed to do? Is essentially really the question of, when girl and boy go out on a date or whatever, what are they allowed to do together, and how as well. Probably towards the end of the video we'll talk about, like, let's say things have gone a little bit too far before in your relationship or past relationships. How do I put the brakes on that in order to kind of bring that thing back under control? So number one, let's deal with how far is too far. Let's get the hard and fast rules or instructions out of the way first, and then we can talk about a little bit of the nuance as we progress. So in 1 Corinthians, it's a book of the Bible if you don't know that, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, there's a lot of really good instructions there for anybody. 6th chapter, verse 18 is where I'm going to start, and then I'm going to stop at the end of the chapter. It says, flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexual immoral person sins against their own flesh. For do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price, so glorify God with your body. Now, what that's saying is, if we walk through this passage step by step as far as the context of this question of how far is too far, we're already upside down. See, what these kids, teenagers, whatever their age is, what they're essentially asking is, how close can I put my hand onto the burner without it burning me? And this passage, its instructions are the direct opposite. Instead of it being, how close can I get without getting burned, it's, how many boundaries can I put up in place between that and me to keep me as far away from it as possible. The first thing is prevention. Like, don't even put yourself in that position to where you're having that conversation now of, I don't know if it's okay for him to put his hands on my breasts or to whatever. Like, don't even get there. If you don't know the answer to those questions in advance, you are playing with fire, literally, and you're going to blow yourself up. All right. The reason for this, the context of it, is that it says that every other sin that can be committed, whether that's theft or if that's envy or if it's all these other sins that exist, those are external. That's something that happens outside, like somebody taking, let's say, breaking into your house and stealing your furniture. That's just your furniture, right? Your life will continue just as it was. Somebody breaks into your car, smashes your car window, gets some stuff out of there. That's just an object. You, however, are still safe, more or less. Whereas sexual immorality, engaging in sexual behaviors when you're not married, you're harming yourself. And our culture would say, well, it's just acts, it's just recreation, it's just something we do for fun, it's not a big deal. Except later in life, you can see the flawed, errant way of their logic in the fact that those simple recreational acts that they've been doing are the single most cause of marital dysfunction and psychological and psychiatric therapy being needed. Like that, it causes literal harm to people. You can't always see those wounds on a person's outside. You can't always see those scars, but they're definitely there. And if you just peruse through a lot of junior high, high school, college age women's feeds, you'll see a lot of these shared posts of like, not every wound is visible. And things like that, because people carry these injuries that have been caused by engaging in sexual behaviors that they weren't ready for and they did not actually really want to be doing, but they felt this pressure to engage in anyways. And in a lot of ways, they regret having been involved with at all. So just stay away from it. And that's my advice always. And they don't want to hear that. They want permission. What they're asking me for is they want permission to engage in whatever the behavior is that they want. I remember in one conversation I was having, where we were having this kind of a conversation, this girl asked, is it a sin, is it a sin to kiss a boy that she was liking? She was looking like, well, if it's sinful, then I won't do it. But if it is sinful, then I will. That's what the conversation was. The point is, if all you're looking for is here's the line, and I can just kind of tiptoe along the side of it and hope that everything's okay, then you're going to hurt yourself over and over and over again. Now, the number 2 thing about this passage that you need to keep in mind is it actually, in a very proactive way, it confronts our second argument that a lot of boys, girls, ignorant individuals will make regarding this issue. It bleeds over into the abortion conversation as well, but it's that it's my body. Who's to say what I can do or what I cannot do with my own body? Now, as a secularist or as a pagan, if you're not a Christian, then you know what? That's true. It's your body. Do whatever you want. Do whatever harm you want to do to it. But you can see the schizophrenia of our culture about this, because if a person decides that they want to cut themselves, they want to cause actual physical harm to themselves with a razor blade or some other form of self-harm that way, if they want to do that to themselves, like, my body, my choice, right? My body, I can do whatever I want with it. I was actually confronted with that argument just a few days ago, of that other people treat me like garbage, so why shouldn't I do the same thing? And from a secular mindset, from a worldly, ungodly perspective, there is nothing to argue against that. However, this passage gives us the ammunition we need to fight back against that by saying, in verse 19, you are not your own. It says you were bought with a price in verse 20, continuing on. So therefore, glorify God in your body. Now, something that comes up in in car circles of when you have a design of a vehicle, whether it's a high performance car or a truck or like, what did the designers have in mind when they were making this car? Was it high speed, high RPM, tight cornering ability, the ability to stay kind of stable and oversteer, or is it just carrying capacity? We're going to have a lot of people or a lot of things or a lot of materials in this vehicle. Like, what is the designer intending for it? Because that determines a lot of ways what that vehicle will be capable of. Now, people will deviate from that. They'll take a truck and they'll turn that into a drag racer. They'll take a station wagon, turn it into a drift machine or whatever. Like, they do that, but you can see like there's a incongruity about it. They've taken what the designers intended and they kind of turn that on their head, and as a result, it's unique and whatever. But in a lot of ways, like, you can, if you go and you talk to these people that have done that, they've taken that station wagon and turned it into a drift piece, the main thing that they'll talk about is this thing takes a lot of maintenance, constant. Like, I'm constantly having to retool the camber, or I'm constantly having to adjust the alignment. I'm having to do all these things to it constantly because what I'm trying to do with this vehicle, it was not made to do that. And they just kind of commit to it that way, of that when they start that, saw a dude that he was trying to drag race a van, and as a result, like, he had lots of difficulty with it because vans are big, and with dragsters you usually want to have small vehicles with high amounts of power. So he was having all kinds of difficulties getting speed, getting RPMs. He was blowing out clutches, he was doing all that kind of stuff because it's hard to make something do what it was not made to do in a safe and a sustainable way. The same thing is true with our physical bodies. As we are engaging in relationships and interactions with other people, there's a way that it was made, designed to engage in those things. And there's a way, there's infinite ways in which it was not made to do. And what is happening, especially with my last video, we talked about the whole pedophilia thing trying to mainstream itself, is that we have a culture that is just trying to ramrod all these wrong ways of doing it onto us. They're saying that it's normal, that it's just something that you were born with, that you were born this way, they're blah blah blah. They're using all this same rhetoric over and over and over again to say that just do whatever you want, and consequences and whatever, just be damned, essentially, is really the mindset that they have, and that's not healthy. And you can see that it's not healthy with the way that our society continues to deteriorate, where you have junior high, high school kids taking their lives, taking weapons into their schools, and just all the stuff that they're doing. It's showing that what we've been doing has not been working, and doing more of those same things is not going to work anymore. We've got to do something different. Now, the last thing is, you do need to glorify God with your body. It's not enough to just go into Sunday mornings and play some worship music or whatever. Like, we're called to glorify God with our physical bodies, and that means that there's all those postures involved with worship, raising your hands and bowing your heads and lifting your eyes and standing and kneeling and sitting and all those things. Those are all part of that. But the main thing about it is that what's happening Monday through Saturday is just as much worship as what's happening on Sunday morning from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. It's not that worship is this section of a Sunday morning service where there's the music being played, then the guy comes up and he talks for a while, and then that's it. That's all you do. That's not how it is. Our commercialized kind of Christian music industry has made that, kind of imposed that idea onto us. That's not how it works. The Bible is replete with passages talking about you need to do everything, or do whatever it is that you're doing as if you were doing it for God Himself, not for your boss, not for your wife, not for your kids, not for your parents, that you're doing this for God. In a way, you could look at it like that's grace. One of the hardest things about life is not knowing what to do. So much of life is just fighting and trying to discover, what was I put here for? Well, if you were just to follow in the instructions in Colossians, it's like, listen, you've been wired a specific way, and it's pretty intuitive what that is. Athletes and musicians and stuff, they kind of just stumble into it sometimes. It takes work, effort, discipline in order to make yourself great at it, but there's this natural kind of feel to, like, you can tell a really good salesman. Like, you were made for this. Like, you were meant to fit this role. And there's a glory aspect to that because they're doing something physically, day to day, ongoing. And it's just, you cannot exclude the habits and behaviors of sexuality, interpersonal relationships, from that process. They're just as much part of your worship aspects to God as anything else that you will do. We need to glorify God with our bodies. That means the decisions that you make of this is what we will do, and this also includes the decisions of what to make when it comes to this is what we're not doing. I'm setting up a boundary here. We're not going to cross that line. Hey, it's your boy. Just his voice, disembodied this time, but coming back for a little update after I finished the last video. It was just getting a little out of hand time-wise, so I decided to cut it at the end of the portion where I was talking about the scripture itself, and split this into a two-parter. Not something I want to do all the time, but this time I feel like it kind of just deserved it, more or less, needed it. So keep an eye out. It should be next week when I have the second half of this video coming out, and then I've got some other stuff coming up as well, and so keep an eye out. Like, share, subscribe, you know the rules, you know the deal, and I look forward to catching up with all y'all in the comments and everywhere else. Later.